We're here at Money 2020 Asia today, and I'm joined by Jaykie, who is the Head of Business Development for Asia Pacific for Mambu. And of course, returning again on screen, Cecilia Tan, who is the Regional Vice President of Thredd. Now today, we want to settle a debate. Which business model is better? Which business model is a better route to profitability, a better route to innovation? And I think if we look at Southeast Asia, very uniquely, there is a convergence of e-wallets, there's a convergence of digital banks. While a lot of e-wallets in Malaysia, in Philippines, have gone the route of securing digital banking licenses, some have remained to choose to remain as an e-wallet. And I guess the question is, which is a better business model? And it's interesting because I think Mambu works with a lot of digital banks and Thredd works with quite a large number of e-wallets. So I think you guys will be able to give us a lot of perspective about these two comparisons. So maybe we'll start with Cecilia. Thinking about a profitability perspective, right? And also long-term sustainability as well. Comparing the two business models, which do you think has the upper hand?
In my perspective, digital banks, I think it really depends on the demographics, and the objective of the respective, digital banks or e-wallets, right? So if let's say you look at what has actually happened, in Asia Pacific, not just in Southeast Asia, especially referencing, the key players like Alipay and WeChat Pay, as wallets, they emerge, from user experience first, right? So they actually emerge as a digital, as an e-wallet that actually serve everyday purposes.
Yeah.
Right? So their user experience really stems from how to better serve, their consumers, from a payments perspective, and how they as a wallet, become a super app, over time, embedding a lot of day-to-day experiences, within, their wallets, right? However, we are also seeing a trend right now that, these two different, I would say, industries are sort of coming to a merging point, right? So, from my perspective, there isn't a better, one over the other. It really depends on what is the purpose that they're actually serving. Consumers today, they definitely would like to actually maybe go for digital banking or a digital bank, for wealth management, better access to, banking services, online, without having to go into a branch, convenience, speed, to getting, to the traditional, banking, services. But e-wallet will be more prevalent, in our day-to-day life, right? Especially if I say the e-wallet, has actually embedded, a lot more other services, not just payments, right? So I think, for me, it's not one better than the other, but it's really what you're actually using, the services for.
Depending on the use case, depending on the kind of gap that you're trying to fill. And I think one clear example of that, because you brought up Alipay and also WeChat Pay as well, which of course I think when we think about success cases, these are the two of the biggest success in the industry. Even they have banks as well. So I think even they are thinking from the perspective like, okay, what problems are we trying to solve for, right? What about you, Jaykie? What do you think? Like, which model do you think is the right model for Southeast Asia?
I think it really depends on the market that we are operating in, right? I would say for the digital banks, those who have actually adopted the right technology from the beginning and hired the right talent pool, they would definitely have the upper hand. Usually what we understood from Mambu perspective, we power a lot of digital banks in the regions. Those with a specific clear niche of business offering, for example, like the Aeon Bank in Malaysia, they have a very specific proposition on Islamic banking that will actually attract a different pool of customer into the business. So that is the part that I believe these three factors, the business model, the people, and also the technologies are very important in giving them the upper hand, right, in terms of achieving the profitability.
Sure. And I think we've reached a point in the world where I feel we are a bit post-growth. I think there was a point where the only focus for most companies is growth at all costs, right? But I guess these days the name of the game is profitability, and both business models are notoriously difficult to achieve profitability. I think the famous stat is that only 5 to 6% of digital banks are profitable. We think about Southeast Asia, GCash is, as I understand it, the only profitable e-wallet. A lot of the other e-wallets are very, very successful locally, but they still haven't really reached that milestone yet. So maybe we'll start with Cecilia again, and then we'll jump back to Jaykie. Right? What do these players need to do to be closer to that profitability goal, Cecilia?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, right? So if let's say you look at GCash, their revenue stream, doesn't just comes from transaction, revenue, right? I think they leverage their critical mass of their users, to be able to also generate, for example, they are able to actually extend like lending services, investment services, and then leveraging their critical mass to also, generate advertising revenue, partnership revenues as well. So I think from an e-wallet perspective, in order to be profitable or at least to reach, profitability, faster, is to actually leverage, your user base to be able to then, drive incremental or additional revenue streams, right? So just coming from transaction value, there's only that much that you can actually
Famously
grow.
thin margins.
Right,
Yeah.
thin margin,
Yeah.
right? And then, but it's how then you can actually make use of your consumer base to be then able to actually, get additional revenues from investment services, lending, advertising dollars, loyalty programs, partnership opportunities and collaboration.
Yeah, I guess the thinking is the payments is what gets them in the door, right? And once they get through the door, you really need to think about what kind of services can you offer them around. And I think...
And of course, loyalty and retention, right? So, your products have to continue to innovate. Getting the user in is only the first step, but how can you continue to innovate, push out new solutions, so that your wallet become like the top wallet? When your users want to actually pay, they will not think of any other payment method but your wallet, right? So that creates stickiness. And with that stickiness and that retention, over time, you will then be able to actually draw in, more partnerships to be able to then continue to create that virtuous cycle,
kind of the
within
knock-on
your
effect,
app.
right?
Yeah.
For sure. And of course, Mambu, you guys work with quite a large number of digital banks across the world. Some, I'm sure, are profitable, some are less so, right? So when you look at this kind of clients and when you look at the banks that are in the market, what do the profitable and the successful ones have in common?
I would say those who successfully created an ecosystem that's super niche to their context, right, will have the upper hand again. Like what Cecilia mentioned earlier, right? If you are a super app, for example, we take Grab as an example. They basically become the lifestyle app. In Singapore, everyone just use them to pay, use them to book the Grab car, and then we even use them to send gifts to friends. So it has integrated into our lifestyle, and it is so user friendly, and therefore I think this kind of player will definitely continue to excel in their space. And in Thailand specifically, we are powering Ascent.
Right.
Yeah, Ascent, in specifically the Ascent Nano business. So they actually operate as an e-wallet through the True Money app. Yeah, they have more than 20 million users.
And it's the most popular e-wallet in Thailand, right? Yeah.
And on their journeys, actually is a prime example to showcase how an e-wallet provider eventually want to apply for the digital bank license.
And rumors were they are going to get it. We don't know. We're still waiting for BOT on the final word on that.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
So,
we
exciting.
are super excited with the announcement, and hopefully in near future, we will be able to power them from the deposit perspective, right? Because they already using our lending engine for the digital lending products. It's just an upsell actually for Mambu to continue to support them in their journey.
It's so interesting because we see all this evolution across Southeast Asia, and we see two different routes that companies take. So like GCash, they maintain as an e-wallet, then Maya, they go into becoming a digital bank, and similarly Ascent's ambitions and Boost in Malaysia. So we're seeing all these things that's happening, right? And I really like your point about stickiness. I think if you look at Malaysia, the one that's currently leading the race is GXS, right? And the reason why they're leading the race is also because they have all these use cases around their banking services. But on to my next question, right? And I think this is an important one because a lot of times how we stay competitive in the market is how fast we can innovate, how fast we can roll out new products. Do you feel that because the regulations is a bit lighter for e-wallets, that it's easier to roll out? And on the flip side for Jaykie, do you think that because the licenses allow them to do more things that they're able to innovate a bit further? So maybe we'll start with Jaykie, then we'll jump to Cecilia to debate this point.
Definitely. So for digital bank business, it's exciting.
Of course, right?
Because
it's a new hot thing in
it's a
town.
new hot thing in town, but it has been around for quite a number of years now. People have seen some successful case and some less successful case. For example, Sinja in Australia, right? Yeah. So a hard decision needs to be made. So I would say effective planning is the key, right? Come up with a proper business plan and define specifically which segment they want to target. For example, in Vietnam, we actually power Cake. It's actually one of the digital bank led by VP Bank, incumbent bank that launches a subsidiary that want to do this digital proposition. So the interesting thing about them is we actually enable them to go live in 74 days.
Really?
Yes. It's quite unbelievable. It's a green field for us. They don't actually touch the existing tech.
Did anyone sleep during these 74 days? So
I think they just continue to add more resource onto this project. So they are pretty successful now, capturing more than 2 million users in the Vietnam market, and specifically also targeting the millennial segment. So with a new digital propositions, right, trying to enable them differently. And for digital bank, one thing is that they can offer a very diverse product offering, including the saving pods that I actually learned from Kakao Bank during the presentation
another
yesterday.
amazing case study.
Yes, right. They are not only profitable, they also come up with a lot of creative use case, and that includes some, I think 26-week savings plan, right, to help the users to achieve their saving goal.
Right, for more short-term kind
Yes,
of goals.
exactly. And there's also some products that they offer which will allow the customer to choose when exactly you want the money to be mature. You can actually withdraw you used to have fixed deposit, right? Now you can define the own duration. You want it 13 days, 14 days, it's fine.
Not like those days where you have to wait for it to mature, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think during my parents' generation, they definitely, let's wait for 2 years for this FD to mature. But nowadays, things have changed so much. And yeah, I would say diversification of service offering and product offering is definitely instrumental for the success for this digital bank.
Given how volatile the world is right now, I think we can all appreciate a bit of liquidity here and there, right? I guess what I'm getting from you is that with the right team, with the right technology, and with the right regulations in place, the speed of innovation for digital banks can be equal to digital wallet is the position that I'm sensing from you. What's your position, Cecilia?
Well, for Thredd, we had the, I would say, privilege of working with both digital banks and also e-wallets, in this region, not just in this region, but also globally as well. So we do see that digital banks, because they are a licensed entity from the central bank of the country that they are operating in, so they definitely in the beginning has to fulfill a more regimented licensing process before they can actually go live, right? But because I would say they are properly licensed and properly structured, so when they launch, they will have definitely, like what Jaykie says, right? Have a more thoroughly thought out, go-to-market strategy and plan. But they will take a longer time, to sort of like launch that, phase by phase in the market. They are answerable, or they need to be compliant, to the regulators. So they need to make sure that they have a very structured, approach or structured go-to-market strategy, in order not to disappoint, their consumers.
I think trust is very important, right? So you don't want to kind of squander the trust that's been given to you.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is the role, or that is what the digital bank has to make sure that they maintain and they sustain, right? But on the flip side, right, I'm not saying that e-wallet are not compliant. They also have their own set of compliance, right?
Concern.
Yeah, so e-wallet, as you can see in different markets, they will also have their own, license regime. Like say, for example, in Singapore, to be an e-wallet, you need to be a SVF holder. Yeah, and then in other markets, like for example in Philippines or even in Thailand, you need to be an EMI holder. In Malaysia, you also need to be an EMI holder as well. Because you are touching your consumers' money. So there will be a need to have the proper governance and accountability. But on the surface, it may seem as though e-wallet seems to be more lightweight and easier to launch. But I think it really depends on the use case that you are launching to serve, right? But then over time, in order to be sustainable, in order to make sure that you are there for the long term, the accountability and the compliance governance has to be in place, right? While you tackle the compliance and governance, you also have to make sure that you continue to innovate, so that you continue to stay in the game. Yeah, so I would say yes. When it comes to launching, digital bank seems to take a longer time to launch. Yeah, e-wallet seems to be more lightweight and can launch faster. However, I think over time it becomes a similar playing ground. You still have to make sure that accountability, governance, compliance is there to stay in the game longer.
So what I'm sensing from you is that both are equally equipped to be innovative, but maybe for digital banks, the time to market may not be as fast as a digital bank. And that's also the conversation I'm hearing on the ground as well, right? There's a large e-wallet that told me, Vincent, why do I need to get the license? I can launch the same services and I can do it a little bit faster. And I guess that speaks to the different kind of use cases. Maybe switching gear a little bit, I think we spoke a little bit about trust. And what we trust differs from generation to generation, right? And I believe maybe for the older generation, they feel more comfortable hearing the word bank. They're like, oh, it's a bank, it's probably safer. Between digital wallets and digital bank, do you think trust plays a factor in terms of which services that the general demographic prefer to engage in?
Because of our life experiences, may trust the digital bank versus the traditional bank differently. But I think I would like to also add on that it also depends on the country that we are in. So say for example in Singapore, we are so used to the traditional banking ecosystem. Definitely I think we will have a greater amount of trust in the traditional banking system because we grew up with it. But I think the younger generations tend to be more daring, to try new things, so that's why digital bank adoption, is also pretty high among the young generation. But I think I would also like to look at it, from a geo-location perspective, right? So in a lot of emerging Southeast Asia markets whereby there is a large population of unbanked, right? So traditionally they don't have access to traditional banking, services or the ecosystems. But then, the digital banks and the e-wallets come in to really plug that gap, and that's why the e-wallets are able to really take off, in emerging markets because they are addressing, financial inclusion for the unbanked. So if let's say an e-wallet, for example, like Gcash, right, can facilitate, the buyer and seller, and then they become like, the custodian of all these funds, sitting between the buyer and seller, then it makes it very easy, for the buyer or seller to then actually adopt it as also a payment method, for their daily lives, right? So, and trust can be built along the way because it started off with microtransactions, micro loans, build up the consumer behavior, consumer confidence, and then it becomes a habit, it becomes a pattern, right? And then the more the platform or the app, can prove stability, can earn trust, then that's how trust is actually built. So I think it's regardless of whether you are a wallet or a digital bank, I think, once you are able to actually perform, prove your stability and prove that you are there, when the consumer needs you, you're not going to fail them, and then I think then you will become like their top choice. Yeah.
I think this brings me nicely to my next question, right? Because a lot of the mission of e-wallets, the founding mission of e-wallets and even digital banks, and very also clearly written in a lot of the frameworks by the regulator, is to tackle financial inclusion. Which model do you think is better equipped to serve the underserved? Jaykie, your thoughts?
I would say it's a mixture of both, right?
That seems to be the theme for today. It depends.
So country specific. For example, if we take Philippines, right? there are still quite a sizable number of population still live in a rural area. So for that, I think a wallet proposition will be easier. Like Gcash, as far as I know, they are powering most of the finances for this group of people. And for country like Malaysia, Singapore, we are pretty well connected, right? So I think a digital bank proposition will do better.
And also our financial inclusion is over 90%, right? So it's a different set of financial inclusion that we're trying to do.
And if you look at Asia, right, you have the emerging markets and the more developed market, and that's how we see it. For digital bank as well, right proposition again is the key. Right, Islamic banking is on the rise. Right, Indonesia and Malaysia both they are talking about how to enable Islamic finance. Even in country like Philippines and Australia, I do heard about this Islamic banking.
Yes.
Value prop. It's quite interesting for them. Okay, no interest. Okay, that's something that we are trying to achieve as well in Mambu with Aeon Bank and of course Bank Jago as one of our client in Indonesia. Definitely well positioned us in this space.
Thank you, Jaykie. And your thoughts, Cecilia?
I think it really depends on how well you can actually credit score or credit assess, your consumer, right?
Yeah.
So, in my experience or in my interaction with, some of the, I would say, more innovative e-wallets, right? They are actually using social media profile, right? To do credit scoring, because how can you then, credit score your consumers, if let's say they do not have a credit history before, they have no access to, banking, product or credit products, and then there's no way you can actually do a credit scoring.
Or if the country doesn't have a credit bureau as well.
Or
right?
if let's say the country has a fragmented, credit bureau
exactly.
or
not a singular.
Not a robust, credit, bureau, then that's where the challenge, still remains for a digital bank to reach out or to, get customer acquisition, right? So I think what the either you are e-wallet or you are a digital bank, I think the first problem to solve is really credit scoring. How can you credit score your consumers? So I've actually heard of fintechs trying to use social media profiling their buying behavior, and then using the leveraging micro loans, to help them to build their credit profile, right? So with all these factors combined, then you help a unbanked, individual to then, slowly get into the financial ecosystem, by building all this profile for them. Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting because people are using so many different data points to do credit worthiness, right? It's not just what we used to with the credit scores in the past. And of course, speaking to your point about all these players with ecosystem, they also have access to a rich database to be able to make some of these decisions more accurately. Now, before I let you guys go, I want to hear about how Mambu and Thredd are respectively powering these players to success and possibly profitability. Where we'll start with Jaykie and then we'll jump back to Cecilia.
Yeah, sure. So with Mambu, right, we have actually more than 50 clients in Asia Pacific region. So we do have a sizable revenue streams from these customers because we are a software as a service based provider. So the revenue-wise is actually recurring. So that actually makes us a stable company. In order to power the digital banks, it's very important for us ourselves to be financially stable, right? So this is one of the points that I would like to emphasize that, Mambu, we are very strong in terms of our funding. And it's good to acknowledge that, that when we enable the digital bank, there are a lot of technology providers in the markets who can actually enable them to go to the market the quickest. Often, Mambu as a configuration-based platform and the solutions integrated with an ecosystem partner like Thredd, right, is well positioned. We will want to emphasize on time to market here again because the first one who launched first will definitely get the most number of clients.
It certainly helps.
I'm very keen to find out who will launch first in Thailand.
Me too. We're keeping such a close eye.
So 3 licenses will be awarded and one of them is already our client and we can't wait for the announcement to come through that they are the one who win that. And I think with ecosystem partners, they are really the catalyst, right? Mambu is all about composable architecture. we need to have like-minded partner like Thredd help us to serve the ecosystem together.
And for all you know, by the time we go live with this video, we would already know the results.
Yeah. Most likely.
Cecilia?
Yeah. So, Thredd, we are a global modern issuer processor, certified by, globally certified by Visa and MasterCard. So really we are on a mission, to help our digital banks, our fintechs, launch innovative card programs, globally, whether they are virtual cards or physical cards, whether is it, tokenized to the Google Pay, Apple Pay of the world, or they want to actually, launch their own, tokenized, wallet, capabilities. We are there to actually support them, right? And with ecosystem partners like Mambu, so for example, digital banks, right? So digital banks will have to, make use of the Mambu, composable, infrastructure to launch, their banking, capabilities. But then, when it comes to card issuing, that's where, we will come into the picture, right?
Yeah.
So, and card programs, right, is really essential for, a digital banks or even, a e-wallet, fintech to do, to fulfill a few things, right? Number one, customer acquisition, right? So to acquire new customers, to create, loyalty and retention, because now you not only have access, to say banking services or, my e-wallet services, but then, now you can also spend, right? You can also spend through, my card programs, online, offline, wherever you travel, expanding, the payment experience, not just domestically, but also internationally, So that's how we are actually positioned to help, whether a digital bank or, a e-wallet or any fintechs, out there, with our services, right? And of course, with ecosystem partners like Mambu, we hope to be able to actually do more, and beyond.
Okay, very cool. One last cheeky question before we go, just to put you guys on the hot seat. Maybe to put on the hat of a future entrepreneur, for example. So if you were to be given a choice, which business would you start? Would you start an e-wallet or will you start a digital bank?
Yeah, let me go first there.
Both tough businesses, really.
Both are really tough business, and because in both areas, they are already very strong, players, right? Very strong market leading, players. It's so competitive, right? But let's say, put aside all this, let's say I were to start my own business, right? I think I would like to start with an e-wallet, targeted at, young children, right? Because just like the McDonald's analogy, right? So every kids, grow up, eating McDonald's, right?
Start them young.
And start them young, and then into their adulthood, they will also remember McDonald's as their comfort food, right? So I think from an e-wallet perspective, right? If let's say you can launch an e-wallet, targeted at the young, teaching them financial literacy, from young, and also getting them used to the payment method through a wallet, and then embedding lifestyle, services and solution into their wallet, say for example, gaming, educational services into that wallet, they will then grow up with it.
Parental controls for sure.
Of course, with parental control, in place, but then, then that's where your longevity, of your product, is there. Yeah, so that would be what I think, in terms of what I will launch.
And arguably, building financial literacy habits is better than McDonald's habits. So that's a good plus. What about you, Jaykie? What would you do?
Interestingly, even though I work for Mambu, we power a lot of digital banks. If I am going to become an entrepreneur, I want to launch an e-wallet business.
Okay.
Yes. It's very interesting, right? For e-wallet provider, first of all, you have less compliance worry to take care. They are still there. Less regulated, slightly less. Yeah. But you think about e-wallet, technically they are replacing everyone's physical wallets today. Right? You have everyone that you can integrate. If I were to launch, let's say a multi-currency wallet, similar to U-Trip, probably better in the future. Yeah. So business travelers will need something like this, like digital. It just exists on my mobile phone, and then I can tap on the terminal and wherever, tap on even some mobile devices to make payment. I think that is very cool. And I would love to integrate AI into the business. This is another hot topic.
You can't not do it these days, I feel.
So then the AI will actually help to analyze the consumer behavior, and then in case I overspend, they can also prompt me. I think the beauty of e-wallet business, you can actually integrate it with the various digital banks. Right? And if this partnership exists and this ecosystem is built, I think it will be very powerful. So if we are both very inclined, maybe we can just do the business together.
5 years later, I'm like, oh, I'm sitting with the co-founders of.
Let's have a coffee chat later.
Anyways, it's been such a great conversation. I really enjoyed a lot of the views that you folks have been able to share. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Appreciate
you. Thank you so much.